Right. Today I'm interviewing Ed Cook. I am laughing a little bit because I just messed up my first attempt at a video. So we're doing a second shot here, a second try. I'm interviewing Ed Cook, who is an alien researcher and also has a few freelancing gigs. So I know you do photography.
Yeah, we do photography. We have a music studio where we teach voice, piano, guitar, and also we do plays every now and then too. We'll do some plays here in the community. And also I do physical therapy. I do massage, and I've been doing the massage, physical therapy, and guitar and photography probably 30 years. I started my business, it was like 1992 after I completed my career as a college baseball coach. And I coached at Indiana University. I've also been in Mississippi where I did this summer baseball programs there at Mississippi State and also at LSU in 1983 and 84.
Okay. So how did you end up in Roswell?
Well, I was living in Terre Haute, coaching at Indiana State, and there was this gal that played the piano real nice, and I just kind of looked at her and thought, hey, she's a nice person. And so nothing ever come. I never spoke to her. She later, a couple years later, moved on to a different church, and so I ran into her, when I started my business, maybe 16 years ago. And we've been married 14 years now. And so anyway, we've met at another church. So that's kind of where we met at, and then ended up getting married. And then she had parents that were having issues with dementia and Alzheimer's. And I lost my mother and other relatives with the disease. And it's the 48-hour book that I read. And I thought maybe I could help Kathy in kind of taking care of her parents. So I had a good business in Indiana, but I chose to go with her down here, and it was like it was a shock down here. I've heard of Roswell, but the alien stuff and the festival I've seen on TV or whatever. But we moved down here, and we've been here for 13 years, I think, and started our business. And she's my assistant, but she also works for the post office in Artesia, and she had a terrible wreck back in May of last year, May 26. She almost died, and she's learning to walk all over again. And so she's still working.
Your wife
there.
is Kathy Cook.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I've called her before when I really needed musicians for. Sometimes it's hard to find musicians for funerals because they tend to happen during the work week, and a lot of the musicians are working. And I think I had called her once or twice to see if she could do funerals. I just made that connection just now because I did not know.
Yes, you start talking in Roswell. People say, even though it might be close to 50,000 people, where Terre Haute, Indiana was 80 almost, it's still like a little town.
It is.
You just start a conversation with anybody, and it's going to whirl you right around to somebody you know. That's kind of a neat thing. But
yes.
Better watch your mouth too when you're talking to people.
Yes, and don't talk too loud anywhere. If you want your private matters to be kept private.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So what I'm really interested in is how you got into researching aliens in the first place.
This started when I was a freshman at high school back in Hartford City, Indiana. I had a friend, Doug Edwards. We were good friends and did a lot of stuff together. And we would, at night, we'd be playing when you got to get home when it gets dark. We'd start seeing things in the sky, and you'd thought might be a falling star or whatever. But I saw things that just didn't work like gravity is supposed to work here in our planet. And these things would be taken off, like up, they go across, down, the things that people now are talking about. And there's enough proof right now, and people in the Pentagon and everybody, to know that this stuff is real. And so going back, I got to go back to the first question you asked me, just what we were talking about.
Yes.
When did I first dabble in it?
Yes.
I think is the question. Okay. So anyway, we were out one night as like I say, as freshmen, and saw these lights, and every now and then we'd see them at any time, 12 months out of the year. Doesn't matter if it was December or January, and you just didn't know, and you didn't see anything back at that time, or you just get teased and that type of stuff like that. Little did I know, in 1947 you had the crash here in Roswell, and not only one, there was 3 crashes that day. And one of the crashes, it was, I think, about a couple 100 miles from here, wasn't discovered until the next year by the Army Air Force. And there were bodies, and then just like the one near Corona, there was a live body, and it's what they call Ebens, and he was about 5'1", I guess, is normal, and they call them grays, but that suit that they have, you can't hardly get it off. It goes with them all the time, and there's actually more orange to them. But anyway, I want to go back now to Indiana. Doug's mother was a waitress, and they struggled for money, but she liked to do stuff for her son. And we started listening to a man named Frank Edwards, and he was known all over the world. He went and spoke about UFOs, and his life was threatened, and if to talk about certain things. And back then, I mean, our government was involved very deeply in this type of stuff, and there have been hundreds and hundreds of people killed and murdered because of this. And he was speaking in Indianapolis, Indiana at the airport. They were going to whisk him in. Now this is 1969, and so 1969 they whisked him into the airport, had high security, but there was one radio station throughout Indianapolis and the Indiana area that broadcast that he was coming, and he had pictures of UFOs. I forget what country, I think he'd been in Peru, where there's a lot of activity right now, and he had pictures and things. So this was going to be a Friday night at 7 o'clock, and it was going to be over, and he was going to fly out and go to his next stop. And he had to have bodyguards because of his phone calls threatening and stuff in his mailbox. And I think there's still books out about Frank Edwards, but if you're interested to into this stuff, when you start hearing about it, people started getting killed. It went back, but it went back before all of that. And so anyway, we got tickets to go see him, and there was a total of I think 500 people they could seat at this auditorium. We got almost all the way to Indianapolis. It was 72 miles from Hartford City to I'm going to get a drink here. Okay. Hartford City to Indianapolis. So anyway, as we got closer to within 12 miles, we were listening to the radio station that was involving this story about Frank Edwards, and it just like it was yesterday, it said, this is a news bulletin from the TV station, and said, we regret to inform people that there has been a celebrity death that just occurred minutes ago, and those of you attending the UFO talk with Frank Edwards, we regret to tell you this, but he was found dead in his motel room.
Oh. And
we did never find out what the cause of death was. That was very, very secret. But at that time, he was one of hundreds of deaths that occurred back then at that time.
What did you make of that?
Well, I'm just a stupid little kid, freshman there,
right.
And you don't think much about stuff like that. But the fact that he died, and there was people saying it was a cerebral hemorrhage, but those of you that have born in the 50s, excuse me, will remember that there used to be a fictitious program on, and I'm trying to remember, Outer Limits or something like that. Mm-hmm. And in this show, and this is way after Frank Edwards died, it was a few years later that people died on that show. It was fictitious, but they always died of cerebral hemorrhage. And it was just weird to see a fictitious TV show, and then in real life, supposedly this guy dies of a cerebral hemorrhage.
Okay, that's intriguing. But you still do this research?
Yeah, I still, I've always had it, but there's so much that's hidden. And back then, you only got 3 stations on TV. You didn't have cable. It's just a great thing to be able to get on a TV or radio and kind of go after what you want to. So this stuff, when we moved down here, it began to change. Actually, it changed in Indiana before we took our U-Haul and took the 3 days to come down here. My wife had told me, we got married shortly before coming down here, and before we got married, she wanted to sit down and talk to me. And she said, Ed, I've got to tell you something because it's part of my life. And she doesn't like to really talk about it in public, but she looked at me and she was actually crying. And she says, this might change things, but I want you to know that my dad was in the Air Force. He didn't graduate from high school, but you can be book smart and when you do things on your own, and very, very good at what you do, which is what happened to him. So Kathy tells me that he joined the Air Force, and of all things, he had training also in Indianapolis, Indiana. So when I probably wasn't born yet, but he was there in Indiana at one time. So anyway, she said that her and her brother and sister, Bill and Karen, they moved when Bill Anderson was in the Air Force along with the wife. They moved to one of the Air Force bases, and I can't remember if it's Eglin. I think it was in Arizona. I have to go back and fact check that again. But it's one of those 2 or 3 bases out there. And he had a job where he couldn't tell his family what he did. And he worked on propulsion systems. And that, is how can we get engines to go faster?
Okay.
And so that's what his specialty was. So he would go to work early in the morning and come home late at night, and sometimes not be able to get to sleep. He'd go back to work. And we don't know exactly what it was he was working on, but it was top secret. And so, from the age of World War II to the Korean War to the Vietnam War, those were times when we were doing a lot of research and making weapons of mass destruction, tanks, guns. We're putting a lot more technology. And you take 1947 till now, the rate and increase in technology is so vast and quick. You can never see a time in just a few decades where we have all this stuff right now. I mean, just imagine the craft that was recovered in Roswell, or the place outside Corona. What happened with that, they took that, and the Army Air Force was right on that wreck right when it happened. And we thought that these things were shot down or lightning struck them down. They run on electromagnetic energy. There's no fuel. You don't even know they're in the air. You could look right to the right. You would see it right there and not know it. And so these things were really spectacular. And Russia, or this USSR, was having their days and times of recovering UFOs. And Peru, it was really big in that time. But there was a lot of UFO, what they call underground bases in New Mexico. And so at another time I could talk to you about the bases that were there. But anyway, going back, not to go too far away from her dad, they stayed for 3 years. He was here at that air base, and the family, the 2 older brother and sister of Kathy's, they went back to Roswell. It was Kathy. So he'd been there a couple months or so, and Kathy was 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that. And she was sleeping in bed one night. She'd been having dreams. And so one night she had this realistic dream that she was elevating herself. She was coming up through the bed. And so it was like she's going up to another dimension, to up in the sky. What's going on? People didn't know at that time. People didn't talk about much of that stuff. And she felt herself being up in the air. And then the next thing she knows is she's in a spacecraft. And she assumes that she was because of what she saw there. When she was there, she thinks that she could have been there for 4 or 5 hours, but when she comes back and wakes up in her bed, I think only an hour or less had passed. And so there's time loss, which occurs in alien abductions, this type of things. But you take people that are intelligent and smart who don't want attention. She don't even want to talk about stuff like this. And she probably doesn't like me talking about it. I should have asked her, but it come to my heart, and I wanted to try to give some facsimility to what had happened. So she was up there, and she was hurting. She felt probed, and they were trying to be nice. But how she described the creatures were like Eben-like, the kind that you would see in Roswell, New Mexico at the McDonald's downtown. People put them in the back of their trucks, that type of thing. That's what she saw. She saw 4 of those, and they were centered around her. And there's something called Nordics and Tall Whites. And they've been here on Earth for thousands of years, way before the Bible was ever founded out and written and shared and things. They go back a long time. And I will give you all kinds of factual information on that. But anyway, when she come back down out of the ship, she was just coming down, seeing her. She's looking down, almost seeing herself down there. She goes back, down, and then all of a sudden, she just comes to. She was like in a trance. She comes to, and she starts hurting right around her waist. And then she goes into the bathroom and looks, and to sum it up, what she thinks and what I think really happened was that time that might have been her going through her first menstrual cycle.
Oh.
So you think of something like that. You take the eggs or whatever, and you go to cattle mutilations by the hundreds of thousands before that. Nice, discrete cuts that only take just 30 seconds, and you've got the reproductive organs, you've got the tongue, you get the eye. They're precision cuts that our vets and doctors can't make it to this day, make those kind of cuts. And I went forward to another subject, but just going back to Kathy, that's how my evaluation comes, to thinking what they did to her. And she had pains there for a long time, and then she had another one, and this was 6 months later, and she still feels that was the same thing. And then she remembers a little bit to this day. But when you start talking to her about it, there's this shield that comes over her that she doesn't want to talk. And I spend 4 hours a day on research. And when Kathy's asleep, or sometimes she likes to see what subjects I'm on, but I've got my books, I've got the history that I watch or read, maybe from 10:30 till 2:30 in the morning.
Okay.
7 days a week.
Does most of your research come from books then?
It comes from books. It comes from speakers.
Okay.
There's a woman named Linda Moulton Howe, who, going back to 1962, lived out on the East Coast, worked for a TV station, and she was called to out here to one of the western states. I'm not sure which one. It could have been Oklahoma, could have been, I know it was Texas, but she was in 4 states, and it was cattle mutilations. And she started to hear about it, and so she paid her own money, and the TV station gave her her steak, a car to drive food, and she went out there, and she went to hundreds of cattle ranches and experienced over close to 100,000 dead cattle she's seen, 1 at a time, 2 at a time. Sometimes a farmer will lose 20 or 30 heads. And when you go out there, and she has photographic proof of some of this that's happened too. So she's the foremost number one resource that you want to look at, and that will take you to the books, take you to the professional people that left their professions, and something's leading them to this alien abduction, cattle mutilations. And we just had cattle mutilations just last week. I think it was in Oklahoma.
Oh.
And yeah, and those cattle, I tell you, once you look at it, anybody of sound reasoning can look at that and see how those cuts were, like laser cuts. we can't make those cuts. And we know that she knows that the harps are being harvested, the reproductive organs are being harvested, and you get a lot of scientists from major institutions, and Linda Moulton Howe has a list of people who she goes to and who've been big important sources on this. But the cattle ranchers are just beside themselves. There was a prize racehorse that was just abducted. I thought about it, it rose up, and the mutilation occurred on that just 2 weeks ago. And that horse, they just brought that horse to the farm. I don't know how much they paid for it, but what they have is on its side again, the eyeball missing, and all the female organs in that. And so it's going to, we believe these alien abductions, they're taking those items like that, and it could be a hybrid program. But when I'm talking to you and the people right now, from studying down here to way over here years later, you're going to stop and say, oh, that's got to be crazy. But I'm telling you, this is the most real thing that's going on in this world right now. And Peru's a hotbed for it. New Mexico will always be a hotbed for it because there's some bases out there. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to think of the one, I don't know if it was Sandia Lab. Do you happen to recall the lab that was near Santa Fe up there? I'm thinking there was another one out there.
Well, I know Sandia Labs is really closer to Albuquerque.
Okay,
so I don't know if that's the one that
it would
you're
be up
talking about.
north, yeah. And I'm sorry I didn't bring my.
Well, there's Los Alamos, but
Los
I don't.
Alamos.
Okay.
Thank you for that. It was Los Alamos, and there was a meeting, and you'll find this out in our history right now. The sheriff of Los Alamos, he resigned, and they had a full TV interview with him saying he can't keep people safe because there's alien craft coming out of that thing every night. It's a frequency that you hear, a pitch that you hear, and the same thing, you had the sheriff and police chief both. And I'm not sure when those two went, but they could not protect their town. And they were seeing cattle mutilations all over. And into that, you can't get close to that lab up there. You can get real close and you get chased out by government officials.
Right.
And there's been specials on TV about that, but there were a group of scientists who met there. I'm not sure if it was 25 years ago, somewhere in that area. And there was some Ebens, and there could be tall whites, Nordics, but there was one of them going to speak before these 20 or so scientists. And the next thing you know, a lot of it was hidden to the news, but what we gathered was 12 scientists were killed and shot. And there was one of the aliens, whether it be Nordic or whatever, he was shot at and he shot back.
Okay, so can I just interrupt you for a
Yes.
second, because you are bringing up terms that I'm unfamiliar with. So
Okay.
I think you said Nordic, you said tall white.
Yes. Excuse me. Yes, that's good that you stopped me there. Okay. The Ebens are the ones, if you go to a McDonald's, the little ones, and there's even some, those are 4 to 5 feet tall. There's some that are 3 feet tall. A lot of them are AI, artificial intelligence.
Okay.
And they come from a place called Xi Reticuli, and there's about 3 different types of aliens that live up in that planet. So you have those. You have
That's the name of the planet.
that the Xi Reticuli is it's 10 light years away,
Okay.
and that's the name of the what do you call the large galaxy or area that they're in.
Okay.
Right there. There's 6 planets, and I have to have my notes with me on that. But that's where the Ebens live. There's something called the reptilians,
Okay.
and the insectoids. And it almost sounds like you're watching the.
Now, I've heard that, because I used to listen to, what's that guy's name from Wales who talks about the reptilians all the time. I mean, I've heard of that name, the reptilians.
It's all over right now. Yeah, Stephen Leer talks about it. A research scientist whose wife was killed getting ready to talk in front of Congress about it. He was poisoned. He spent several months in the hospital recovering from poisoning. But anyway, going back, you have the Ebens, and next you have the the reptilians. And the reptilians, if you were to look at like a praying mantis type, or if you see a praying mantis outside, study it and watch what it does out there. It's just amazing. It'll blow you away. And there's some type of interbreeding where some like that, those things are taller than ebens. That you just call them the praying mantis type. And then you have what's similar to us. You have a Nordic. Nordics and tall whites have blonde hair. They have blue eyes. And even though I have those, I'm not one of those.
Right.
I'm just regular crazy. But anyway, you have those, and I forget what planet those are on, but they're in that Zia Verticuli area up in there too. And all you have to do is locate Dr. Stephen Greer, G-R-E-E-R, I believe, and then Linda Moulton Howe. If you could write this down, it's called Earth Files Podcast with Linda Moulton Howe.
Okay.
Every Wednesday at 6 o'clock she's on, and you'll hear things. We have whistleblowers. She has people that are still in the Pentagon and still have jobs in national defense. And then also in her list, you've got Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man, the last man who walked on the Earth, or the moon, rather. And you have Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, who's seen them up there. And when they landed, you do your research and you'll find out. You'll find out that there was 3 large craft out there waiting for them to come down.
Interesting.
And on the back side of the moon, that's where we have there's barracks back there. There is a tower back there that goes up a third of the mile, and that's where that's where a lot of them is. And the moon does not rotate. The moon stays still, and it's the only planet that we know about that doesn't have rotation around it.
Okay.
And so that planet of the moon, what we call, there's a lot of crazy stuff that's been seen, and there are pictures leaked from NASA that when the people have quit, and they've shown those, and there's been some people that are in prison today from NASA that released stuff. But a lot of stuff we see today, you won't see any stars. They're Photoshop, like what I do. They black out stars and things like that, where you just see normal things. There's a pyramid also on the moon, and also it's on the backside of the moon. And also on Mars, there's 4 pyramids that are on Mars, and you got a Sphinx type of figure that's there that the NASA will always say that, oh, it's the way the shadows were on that.
Right.
And you have a lot of ham operators that still have the recordings from Aldrin and Neil Armstrong about the aliens on that planet.
Oh, intriguing.
Yes.
What do they? Okay, they're coming from somewhere. Say the name again of where they're from.
Oh, well, Zia Verticuli is just one of thousands of places in space.
Okay, what do they want with us here on the Earth?
That is a $1 million question as to what they want. And I think that we are just here, and you know, I don't want to go into the religion aspect of it, because when you start accepting some of these things, that's a whole different 6 hours I could talk about there.
Right.
But just to keep it just stable and that type of thing.
Well, we might have to split this up into 2 interviews, because
are we
I know
close to our hour.
Well, we're coming up to 30 minutes.
Okay.
So we'll probably have to stop around 35, 40 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Total of about 10, 15 minutes here.
Yeah.
So. Okay. So you were talking, what do they want from us?
Yes.
And the other thing is, what do we want from them?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah,
that's a good question,
we've
too.
been shooting down UFOs. If they can come from just trillions of miles away from here and enter our atmosphere, and all of a sudden get shot down, I said, with all that kind of technology, why does that happen? But it's electromagnetic, and somehow when the Trinity, the bomb went off, that's when we got the attention of these aliens.
Oh.
They share this planet with us. They're underwater. I did for National Geographic, I went out and I shot some things for them toward Catalina Island. Island, and we saw a UFO come right up out of the water and straight up. So we know they're in Catalina Island, they're underwater, and the Nordics and some of those also have, like I say, both are in mountains underground. And we signed in Edwards Air Force Base. President Eisenhower went there, and he signed an agreement for we get technology, we help those aliens with certain types of what I call whatever it is they eat, foods or whatever, up there near Edwards in the mountain ranges. That's where a lot of the extraterrestrials are up there. So we've had a policy with them for a long time, going back to Eisenhower when he was president, not a general, but president of the United States. And so there is a lot, and I just started looking at some of that research right there. So you take when this happened in 1947, when you had the crashes and things. Okay, that's when things started to change. When we were talking, our Air Force and U.S., the Air Force Army, they've known and they've had communications with these extraterrestrials way back then. And in Missouri, going to Cape, I forget the city in Missouri, but that was 1891 when there was an alien there, a crash that was right there. And so anyway, there was agreements signed, and I don't know if Eisenhower or Truman and even President Roosevelt knew of these during World War II. He didn't go visit, but his Secretary of War saw these downed, alien craft. So we're doing something in trade. So go to 47, look at the things that we have right now. I mean, the object you're recording this on.
Right.
We've got Velcro. Velcro wasn't around, and that was discovered in these ships. You got Velcro, and then you've got certain equipment that is used, and we're expanding. We have our own UFO. The United States right now are experimenting with, and that's at Area 51. And there's some other alien bases out there. They can't do the things that the alien craft can do. To back engineer means you got to change it where we can use it. And so sometimes up at night you might see something that's there. There's a lot of people on the California coast that somehow can recognize what ours are. The Germans had something called a UFO time travel machine they were working on. It was up in Antarctica Base, and Hitler had made 2 trips up there, and his scientists were up there, and they were helping making some of these weapons. And anybody who remembers World War II knew that the Germans had a lot more technology than what we've had. And so Admiral Byrd, after the war was over, he went up there, he took a whole fleet of destroyers, battleships, and he ran into UFO craft up there. And they come out firing, they sank 2 of his ships, and he was gone in 7-8 days, I believe it was, making his way back to the United States. We had planes shot down. Admiral Byrd flew a flight into a big hole into Antarctica, and through there he was escorted by 2 UFOs that led him to go down and discover underground cities down there, and these were alien craft that were escorting him. Admiral Byrd was punished, and he had to go not hide, but stay away and never go and talk to the public again. And you can look him up right now and discover that going on in Antarctica. And but anyway, going back to the bases, they're underground, they're in the mountains, but the weaponry that we got, and look at the missiles we have now that go 2 or 3 times the speed of sound or light. They do everything that we don't have that technology. We got it from them, and that's what we're fighting these wars with now, is this technology.
So I assume that there must be whistleblowers who are leaking this information?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then
John Leer, everybody knows the Leer jet.
Okay. Yeah.
John Leer just died not too long ago. His dad, who created that jet, they've had meetings with extraterrestrials. He's seen them, and he's got pictures. And so he died. We think he died in his sleep. There was no funny business or anything. He just died. But all that information he had, a lot of people don't know. Somebody has that information, all that stuff he wanted to share with us before he died. Hopefully he got it to somebody, but nobody knows. But yeah, so anyway, you take people in the space, so many NASA people right now, they think that people on Earth deserve to know what's going on, who's on our planet,
right,
who's out in space.
Right.
This is long overdue. And you saw the first time the Pentagon started having hearings on it, that and the pilots that are flying for the Air Force today have seen them. They're probably seeing them right now. North Carolina, they go out to the ocean out there. They run into UFOs in some kind of game they play all the time. And the same thing off the Catalina coast. They're all over.
Okay, because we're running up against time, and yes, we can do another interview if you'd like to talk more, because I think there's a lot more to talk about. I mean, I'm interested. I find it intriguing. What compels you to continue this research? What is your personal motivation?
I want to know where we come from, and without wanting to argue religion or anything like that, I'm just beginning to think that, you know, there is the creator, the God. There's no denying that. So don't think that these people don't believe in God. It's just a little different, and I can get into that, but I want to have all my ducks in a row before I even do anything along those natures to talk about.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And did I miss part of that question?
No, I think that answers my question. It sounds like a search for meaning, a search for what our purpose here is on Earth, and how we fit into the universe.
Yes. And I've got over 3 hours of UFOs. I have infrared equipment.
Oh.
I can go out anytime and see them, usually when it starts getting dark. So anybody interested in looking at that, trying to discern between what our government has and what the real UFOs are like out there, get you an infrared camera and just watch and be amazed at that.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing this interview with me. I really appreciate it, and I hope that we can touch bases again. Because I think this is going to create a lot of questions, and I might even write my questions down. I try to do spontaneous interviews, but I think I'm going to have some actual questions for you.
They may want to put this guy in homeless place or something like that.
No, I find it fascinating. I think that the universe is very large, and there are a lot of things that we don't know, we don't understand, and we haven't explored. And that's why I would have a lot more questions for you.
No problem. Thank you for having me. And those people that I've mentioned, if you could somehow let them know who they are so they could get on their own quest and journey.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to shut this down now.
Okay.